I'm Matt Manis.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear It podcast.
Music developed, explained, explored, and much more.
Music developed, explained, explored, and much more coming to you live. Not live, but from Open Studio.
We're alive.
We are alive.
We are live.
We are sponsored by Open Studio. Go to openstudiojazz.com for your jazz listen. It's going to become just inaudible.
Take your time on that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, one more time. For your jazz lesson.
And you know why you can take your time?
Why is that?
Because we are a long-form podcast
We are now officially a long-form podcast.
That's the first time I've said that.
I know.
It feels good. It
feels
falls
really
off the...
good. It's been going this way for a minute.
Wait,
right?
let's say it's slower.
We need all the time.
We can do that. We got time.
We do have time.
Filler. This is exciting. We're getting some good feedback. It feels good when you try something. It's like when you're soloing. It's kind of like, let me go try something else. I know what I can do over this tune, but maybe let me try something else. And if it feels good to you, and you try to be objective, but you don't really know until you get some kind of audience response. Even then, it's kind of like, is this a dull audience, or maybe they don't get it or whatever. But I think with this, we've been getting some good response, and we appreciate everybody's comments. Please comment below if you dig long form.
Well, we already know that a lot of people do, because we tried an experiment, and it kind of hits the two main points. I think successful points when we did our long form experiment a couple weeks ago.
And by this, we just mean we don't want to make this fancier than it is.
No,
it's just
the
episodes
longer.
are 3 times as long.
Yeah, no, we're just taking our time with it. We usually had kept episodes to between 15 and 25 minutes.
Right. And as somebody astutely said in the comments, it was basically you rushing me along. I was just about to say something eloquent and important, and then you being you'll hear it.
Exactly. That's on me. And that's on me. No.
I did the same thing to you.
Yeah, when you're doing in that sort of rhythm, you're trying to keep the topics moving along. And then we had decided a couple weeks ago, well, let's just try one just to switch it up, just for our own enjoyment.
Yeah.
Which is part of this.
Yeah.
Let's just see if we can do one for an hour and just like talk for an hour and let it kind of go deeper and kind of let the conversation develop and unfurl in a more natural way. And not only did we get a ton of great feedback, thanks for all the feedback on the first long episode, but I love that conversation. Like, we've been doing these now. We've done a couple of them. This is a couple of them we've recorded. And man, it's so much fun to just sort of like let ourselves off the leash a little bit and let us have these sort of long form conversations.
Unfurl Adam and Peter.
Yeah. And what happens is it gets closer to how we actually talk when we're just hanging, like after a gig or something, which is, I think, the fun of it. So
yeah, and I think there's always like some important things to experiment and to like learn from them. And I'm always thinking about like, how can we apply this to playing? Because we're telling stories in the podcast and we want it to be, but we also want to be respectful of people's time. Although we're just continuing on with useless drivel now. So are we respecting their time? We never know.
Thank you everybody for the great feedback on the long form. We're gonna stick to this format for as long as we feel like it. We've been doing this podcast for 6 years. We've done it many different ways, and right now I think we're feeling sort of like longer time.
You know, one thing that is super applicable to playing and practicing, and I think some of the things we're going to talk about today with this decision, and I doubted you at first, and I got to give you your flowers on this, which is a new term I've been picking up from the NBA playoffs. Giving one's flowers. That means paying the respect, you know. But I, like you said, let's do minimum hour episode. And I was like, oh yeah, we can go longer. You were like, no, let's shoot for at least an hour.
Yeah.
You were very specific about that. And I thought that was weird. I'm like, it's going to be forced or whatever. But like a lot of things, you know, in order to have more freedom with something, sometimes you have to put up some guardrails.
That's right.
Actually, especially as you're practicing or experimenting. And we're always thinking about like, how do we practice in a way so that when we're improvising, we can actually be totally free.
Yeah.
You actually have to do the opposite of that when you're practicing in order to develop the skills that will get you to that place. And I think this was a good example of that.
And sometimes it's just like one guardrail, right? Like you have all the freedom in the world except for this one thing.
Right.
And that can be the thing that really holds it all together. So but let's get to what we're here for today. So on that episode, on that first long form episode, which is called What is Happy Practicing or How to Happy Practice, something like that. Yep. It was all about happy practicing. And we got into
talking about practice. We were talking about practice.
And we got into your practice routine from like Open Studio Pro folks, especially that heard that episode, have been talking about how slowly you practice your scales. We've been practicing now for 2 weeks that slow, and it's like, it's so much fun. And I'm getting real results in my own playing, so thank you for that. But we had a comment. Caleb, could you put up this comment? Towards the end of the episode, we mentioned that you can't information your way to becoming a better player. And here,
Brilliant.
Tribal Genes says, you can't information your way, he says 5150, which is the timestamp. You can't information your way to being a better player. Brilliant. Can anyone elaborate on that? So Tribal Genes, yes, we will elaborate on that right now.
And fun fact, Tribal Genes is the YouTube screen name of a friend of ours that is very popular in the podosphere and jazz world.
Really?
That you may not know. Yeah, Mr. Bob DeBoo.
No.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Oh, Bob's sitting right over here, though.
That was a joke. I'm trying to be humorous.
That was good.
We got more time. We can do such things.
Okay, maybe let's go back to 15 minutes, Caleb, next week. Cool. Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about. I forget how we stumbled upon this idea. I think you and I were talking about it, and maybe with some members.
Yeah. You came up with this term and this phrase, and it's great.
Well,
it definitely evolved over time, which is, I think, a lot of times cool concepts that can drive our playing or our practice or whatever. They're not like, oh, all of a sudden, sometimes they are. You wake up and have this great idea. But it's more like this was an iterative concept. And I remember we did talk about it. And then at a certain point, you were like, yeah, you can't information. I was like, wait, that's what it is. That's what we're talking about.
So what we found, it's been really amazing having Open Studio for as long as we've had it now. And watching people come in, and it's like watching people in all different points of the path in their music development, in their musical development, in their journey to play music better. And we get to see this happen in real time. And what we've seen, and I've experienced, 1,000 times, is a new member will come in and they have it in their head that they just don't have the right information.
Right.
That they need the right scales and the right chord changes, even like the perfect practice routine. If I just had this missing piece,
right,
then it would all come together.
Yeah.
And when we say you can't information your way to becoming a better player, we don't mean that information isn't part of that. Information is, of course, part of it, but it's just the content that's being held by what we're actually working on. What we're actually working on is our artistry. What we're actually working on is our personality.
Yeah.
It's who we are and how to express it to the world. And so that's being contained in the content that we choose. That could be bluegrass banjo. That could be watercolor painting. That could be running track. But all of these are expressions of our humanity and of our connection with each other and everything else around us, right?
Just to throw in there, a good way to think about this, since you threw some other things besides, things that wouldn't be considered artistic, like running track or whatever, cooking, whatever. But that's when people say the art of something, or like, let's be artistic about it. Like, that's the beauty of it. Like, what is the art of like the stickers on this computer? These are not great, but there's an art to that. And it's kind of like, how do you think about that and not take it for granted in something like jazz piano or just or music, which is so intrinsically artistic. But we still have to make an art of it. And when you go just straight information, just the facts, man, give me the ones and zeros, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And it does, and again, that doesn't mean that information isn't important, and that's because that's part of your taste as you develop. Is cultivating information, weeding out information that's not serving you or that you don't like, and growing that garden of information that you have. But that is not the gardener. The garden is not the gardener. Your gardening skills are not your garden.
It's the plumber, not the plumbing.
That's
gotcha.
Exactly. But it is like, so the things that you're growing in your garden, that's not your gardening skills.
Right.
That's not becoming a great gardener. That's the results of becoming a great gardener, right? That's the content of the great gardener. But becoming a great gardener is a process. It's not a thing. It's not something you can read about. Well, the process you can read about, but the thing itself you can't just
My
obtain.
wife has some books about gardening, my friend.
No, but you can't information your way to being a great gardener. You actually have to garden a lot, right?
Well, and I think that this is a great example too, because gardening, it's like, let's say you just get all the information, right? So this is the kind of seeds for this type of soil. You've tested it. This is the microclimate that this will be successful. So you get all that, and then you go and do that. Yes, you need that up to a point. But then it's like the gardener is, how do you respond? Like, then you're looking to see what's the art of it? Like, what's actually happening now?
It's performative.
You
have to perform the gardening.
And it's like the same for us with listening as we're practicing. That's the gardener. Instead of being like, oh, I did it all, I can go do something else and it's just going to come up.
One of the examples I love to use when we're talking about this, especially when I see, like, I say this and people get this skeptical look on their face, I'll usually say, if we're in a big group, Zoom or whatever, I'll say, okay, how many people here have Mark Levine's jazz piano book?
Yeah.
And like invariably, 3/4 of a class will raise their hand. Like, 35 out of 50 people will raise their hand. And you read it cover to cover. Yes, I've had it for 25 years. Yes. Right. How many of you are world-class jazz musicians? Like, if you could execute everything in that book, you would be amazing, right? Like, just having you understand all of those concepts, why aren't you a better player? Right? Why aren't you a great player?
Wow, you come hard in the first lesson. No,
but I think this is mostly to me as well. Yeah. I know more than so many great players informationally. That doesn't make me a better player than them. It also can be proven when you see a kid. When you see a kid who does not have as much experience, doesn't know the same amount of tunes or voicings or any of the language you know, and yet, why is it when they play just a simple pentatonic scale, they sound incredible? Right. Why do they have this thing? Usually it's because they have some kind of talent for connecting to the music and other people and everything else around them in a way that some of us can be blocked by. And that is part of like the work too. I think a big part of this is working on yourself as a person to get your confidence to a place that you can put yourself out there, to not play things that are just designed to please other people, to not play things you think others are going to like, to play truly what you want to be playing. That also is part of it. Developing your taste is part of it, that's collecting information, but the skill of developing your taste is deeper than that. It's almost spiritual because you have
it's the art of listening.
There's so much,
opposed to the science of like, I'm checking a box.
There's so much vulnerability, and having a point of view is very difficult and takes a lot of cultivation. For some people, I think it's effortless. Those are the Nicholas Paytons who just kind of come out of the box with a very strong point of view and a knowledge of like how to convey basic things. And then you talk about stacking habits. Someone like Nicholas Payton is also brilliant and can, like, from the time they're a teenager, just collect all this information, add it to what's already this like mix of performance and brilliance.
And already kind of have a high level of discernment that most people get with experience and age.
That's right. Is not afraid to tell you what he doesn't like. Is not afraid to tell you what he likes. Those things for some people are very hard.
Yeah, for sure.
They're hard to do.
For sure. Yeah. And a lot of times folks will think, well, you only get that from experience or from being old, from age. Like, there's a difference between experience and age. Mm-hmm. And I think experience is something that can be accelerated, not to the point of like, I can tell you a way to get a lifetime worth of musical experience in the next hour. No. But there's people that get more discernment and confidence and understanding and nuance of the art of jazz piano playing by the time they're 22 years old.
That's right.
And then there's somebody else that's maybe 60-something and wants to be connected with the music, but is really at an infant level in terms of their discernment and connection and experience level with the music, even if they've been around it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because, like, what a fun thing. And I mean, for me, like, kind of in middle age, and I don't know if you know this, I'm fastly approaching middle age.
No.
My friend, yes.
You don't look a day over 55.
I'm a day younger, so... But the idea of like, that's the fun thing about getting older is like, if you keep yourself woke, and I don't mean in the way that they're throwing this around politically, I mean awake, like the true genesis of the world.
Awakened.
Like, if you're not stuck in the matrix and you've given up and just like, I want to sit back and be entertained and wait for my Social Security check. If you want to engage with the world and try to become connected with the art of something, the art of gardening, the art of jazz,
of life, of
the
living.
Art of life, the art of like going for a walk and singing to whatever it is, that becoming an infant as an adult, especially when you're older, is one of the funnest things.
Yeah, man.
Being an infant, being in your infancy of something, it doesn't get any better than that.
I've been reading a lot of this Catholic mystic, Father Richard Rohr, who I think he's in like Santa Fe or somewhere in New Mexico or whatever. But he's basically like, he's a Catholic priest, but with like almost a Buddhist sway to the thing, right? Of the very like Eastern philosophical tones in his Catholicism, which I'm just a sucker for right now. Like, it's so great. But he talks about that. He talks about, and the Buddha talked about that too, about sort of like, there's the first stage of life and the second stage of life, and they're not chronological. It's not an age thing.
Right.
It's kind of the first stage is where you're developing your ego, right? The I, the sense of self that is to be destroyed by the second phase, when you're ready to let go of all of the things that you've gathered to like arm yourself against people bringing you down and what you think your status is and things. And there's some people who get to that second stage when they're 10 years old.
Yeah.
And there's some people who never get there, who are constantly disturbed by other goings on in the universe around them until they're 90 years old, and they don't have any space from any of it, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing, this is not a moral judgment on any of that. This is how
it's
humans,
so situational.
It's how humans are. It's how we are. And so I think once you understand that the information, once you kind of free yourself from like, I'm not going to get there by collecting information, and you start working on that second stage, right? You start saying like, okay, I have to not care as much about sounding good. Like that's the goal, of course, is to sound good. But if I'm trying to play like I want to sound good, I'm going to sound bad. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's not going to get me there. I have to be able to take risks. I have to be free. I have to be willing to sound bad and be okay with myself. And the good news is that means, you don't need a scale for that. The bad news is that it takes a lot of personal work, I think, to get there. And I think it's worth the effort. And I think you'll never quite get as free as you'll hear a talented, young person that kind of already has achieved this naturally in many cases. Yeah. But you got to do that work.
Absolutely. Well, and I think I want to just jump back a little bit since we have the time to be able to do that, which is really fun for me. When you were talking about the Mark Levine book, I think that's such a great example and such a touch point specifically for jazz pianists, because is there any book that is more ubiquitous but also like debated and questioned? Like, I think I've gotten more questions over the years is, what do you think about the Mark Levine book? Do you recommend the Mark Levine? Do you think it's good?
There are two Mark Levine books, by the way. There's the jazz piano book and the jazz theory book.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the piano book came first, but then he wrote the jazz theory book kind of for all instrumentalists.
And full disclosure, I'm not going to call down to South Louisiana because I think it's a holiday down there today. So I'm going out on a limb without legal advice. But I haven't engaged with those books much.
Debussier and Debussier. Yeah.
Debussier and Debussier.
Yeah.
I haven't engaged with those books enough to make any kind of editorial judgment on that. And that's not what the discussion today is about. But just the idea of it being something that's often either held on to or like asked about, or is kind of aspired to, like, is that the information that I need to get to the next level? I think that's where we mostly encounter it. Like, do I need this information? And I think that it's the kind of thing like where I it's hard for me to like say, like, it can be the greatest thing or it could be the worst thing. So there's nothing wrong with it.
It's just the information.
It's just the information. And it's good information. That I do know.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Not anything wrong.
There's nothing. But it's like, how do you use it? It's kind of like this other question that came out of some of our longer form discussion recently about whether or not you should transcribe or not. And one of the commenters, in a really thoughtful way, I think, was kind of questioning us talking about transcribing. And really, I wanted to clarify that we often say transcribe, but we usually mean learn a solo. We don't necessarily
write it out.
We're already screwing up the.
We're not talking about writing it out.
Yeah, we're already screwing up the information with that. But then it got to be a little bit of a debate of like, well, some players didn't transcribe and some did, and like that's another good example of like kind of arguing about the information. It's not about the transcribing. It's not about the Mark Levine book. You can do it, or you got to do something. And you're probably
got to do something.
You got to do something.
Peter Martin, 2024. But that's a great point. It's just the real work is developing the life where you're doing something.
Yeah, because none of these things are going to make you worse unless you practice them in a bad way.
Yeah.
In that case, all of them can make you worse, and none of them are going to be the silver bullet because they're just information. But any of them can be in a thoughtful way. Like if you're willing to embrace the art of a Sonny Rollins solo, you're telling me you're going to learn a course of Sonny Rollins solo and not treat it like just information, bits of data that you're input and then you're going to regurgitate or puke out, but that you're going to engage with that as in an artful and thoughtful and spiritual way as you can, that it invites you to without being an advanced player, just if you can get through it. Then you're going to tell me that's not going to help you. I mean, at a minimum, I think it's going to be a fun and joyous thing. It's definitely going to help your ears. It's not going to turn you into Sonny Rollins, but that's not the point.
No.
You're not going to become Sonny Rollins anyway. And the world doesn't need that. We already got Sonny Rollins.
So if information isn't the way, if just what is the alternative, right? I think what can be the issue is that people can kind of get stuck in this cycle of like, well, I just don't have the right information. I'm just not doing this right? And so then you're kind of missing some of the forest through the trees, which is you probably have enough information now to be a really great player. Right. And that's like both, I think for people can be both like kind of inspiring and a little bit scary because like, why am I not a great player? Well, like, let's break it down. how much time did you spend with the information you have?
Right.
Like there are some fundamental things you'll hear. Like we just had Emmett Cohen in here a couple of months ago recording his course. And I'm always struck when I see like these really high level musicians. We had Aaron Parks here too, doing similar things, just solo piano stuff. Simple things that I know how to do in a way that is so beautiful and solid, and like they're little dynamic, feel, touch, rhythmic things happening in just playing Stella by Starlight solo piano that is not just like an Art Tatum, incredible, like kind of thing, but is just this simple thing that is all fundamental space. It's all just work, getting familiar with the voicings you want to play, getting familiar with the sort of color palettes of what you're learning, getting familiar with the tunes, like really knowing it, and getting familiar with things like all 12 keys, which people are, even though we talk about it all the time, they still put off. They still don't want to do it.
It's hard.
It's hard. Bob DeBoo, who's sitting right over here on this side of the camera.
Is he sitting or is he lurking? I can't tell.
He has a whole...
He's menacing. I can feel him.
He has a whole rhythmic class talking about different ways to work with the metronome that are not sexy.
Right.
These are not like... Sorry, Bob.
Bob is sexy as he's demonstrating. But
sexy
the actual information.
But the actual information, like working on just basic time, grinding time, like your sense of time and your pulse and your feel is not as sexy as like cush chords, like moo chords, right? But it is the thing that will make you sound better. Now, the cush chords, everything, those things are like, I love that stuff. It's great. But it's not going to sound good unless you have some basic fundamentals down. You got to get your basic technique together. You got to get your basic time together, your rhythmic feel together, get some kind of repertoire together. Again, the information is not as important as how you do this stuff.
Right. It's like if you, look out and like a couple walks by, an older couple, and this doesn't happen a lot here.
Okay, picture it, right?
Picture it. But like if you're in Italy, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, an older couple walks by that's just super fashionable.
Totally.
Right? So like you can just tell they've got style.
Yes.
Like they're not necessarily models or anything.
They're just older and Italian.
They're just older. And it could happen. You see it in New York, and you see it occasionally in St. Louis. Just somebody that understands the art. Like they're not professional, they're not endorsed or whatever. They're not models. But they understand the art of fashion. That's right? Unlike me. So don't look at me. Imagine out there, okay? But the idea is that like the difference between the information, like somebody might come up to him and be like, "Oh, what brand jacket is that, sir? Oh, ma'am, what is the purse that you have?" Like they're gonna be, if they know what they're like, they might tell you what that is, but the information your way to being a better player is the one that focuses on that. I gotta go get a Ralph Lauren jacket.
Yeah.
When it's actually like, how is he playing it with the shoes?
Totally.
How is it draping on it? Like
the confidence of style, his shoulders are back, like the whole thing.
And he may be like a big guy that's not fit or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. But the idea of like you think that information that you're going to get from him, and it's valid, and that is information,
100%.
is going to work for you. That's where that discernment and also just like adapting, and like it should be more like the question I think would be more valuable would be like, where did you get your sense of style? Like, what's your inspiration for style, as opposed to like, are you going with a shorter hem this season or not? That's so individual. And then if you get that the inspiration, and then he might say, well, I'll cut out little things that I like, and then I'll put them up, and then I'll look online, whatever that is. That's the equivalent of like Bob is giving information in that rhythm class for you to practice, but it's up to you to like figure out the art of the practice of that. It's not just he's not saying anything that hadn't been said before, but he's putting it together in a way that you can use to turn into the art of rhythmic practice.
And listen, for a lot of human beings, it's perfectly natural to want to put things into categories, and like, the math is what's attractive to a lot of people with this. It's like, well, if I can get the information, then I can do it.
Right.
I know I can get information.
There's a logic to like, if 1 + 1 + 1 equals Oscar Peterson.
If Versace sunglasses plus tight jeans plus like
I tried all that. Doesn't work.
Fendi scarf. No.
You can spend some money though.
Yeah. But it's not just that, right? So an uncomfortable fact for a lot of people is like a lot of the stuff that makes people sound great, your favorite players, is not quantifiable. It is something in between the cracks. And it's not something you can just go out and read about or someone can tell you about. It actually takes experience and living a consistent musical life and kind of, again, letting go of what you're playing and instead focusing on how you're playing. These are things I'm talking about, like feel and sound, right? I mean, of course, there are tangible things you can work on with sound and with feel, but it is a lot more ambiguous and not not as easily taught as say harmony, which is like the most easily taught thing, because it's literally like there's 12 notes and here's all the things we can do with them, right? Like harmony is so easy, it's a math equation.
Right.
But like things like a rhythmic feel is not as clear cut.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start breaking it down, all the magic of it goes out.
I know.
You have to just listen and listen.
I have to actually feel this.
And you have to have taste in it. You have to like find the way you feel. And you have to like have confidence to be able to like pull off a lot of these rhythmic things. And you have to have like the grit to know how to like work on it so that it becomes part of your practice routine. And that, again, is not so much about like, well, if I just do this for 6 months and then I mean, it can be,
right,
but like more about designing your life in a musical way than it is about this idea of like, if I just regiment everything perfectly, then I'll get there. It's a lot deeper, like I said, even more spiritual, I think, than that. It's about your being in the world and how you design your life. Than it is how you design a practice routine or a solo or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good little juncture, little segue here for us to acknowledge that we are extreme hypocrites with what we're talking about today. Because I just realized, well, not hypocrites, but
that one hurt. I'm not going to lie, that hurt.
I said we.
Hurt a little bit. Okay. Yeah, you said you brought me into it. Go ahead.
I just want to clarify, because we're saying you can't information your way to being a better player. Yeah. But I think, are giving some information today that will make people a better player.
I have an answer for this.
Okay, good.
I could see where you would think it's hypocritical.
Have you checked with the DeBossiers?
I have DeBossier and DeBossier on retainer, and they are texting me now. We're all good. Okay. So this is something we've also discovered. So as we were kind of talking about this years ago, about like, man, people who are coming to Open Studio, they're craving this information. And when they get here and they get all the information, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right. It's not changing their playing in the way that they want to. And so then we said, well, we got to give them the experience of, actually becoming a better player by doing these things, which is what kind of Open Studio Pro and the community aspect has really blossomed out of that idea. But if like when we experimented with like really cutting out all information or steering people away, it's kind of like one of those things like you can't tell people that information is not going to do it. And we don't talk about, you can't information your way to become a better player.
And we don't outlaw
a lot.
Open Studio.
Well, no, but you actually kind of have to experience this for yourself. It's like, it's like very much like meditation. Like meditation is kind of this practice of trying to do something again and again until you finally realize you can't do it. Yeah. But you can't just think like, I can't do this. You have to actually experience yourself trying this and realizing like, okay, thoughts aren't stopping. Like it's not going to stop.
But that in itself is an important piece of information.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
But it's an experience.
Yeah.
And with that experience, you're able to let go and not be concerned about the thoughts coming. And then you let the thoughts come and go. And then you're able to get a lot of space from that, right? That's just one very small part of the whole thing. But I think it's a very similar thing with the information of music, right? Which is like, you can't just tell someone, it's more about how you play than what you play. You have to like bump your head up against the wall and be like, okay, well, I have giant steps and I know all these scales.
But it doesn't sound right. I'm putting pieces of information together,
right?
And does not compute,
right? So people actually have to like. That's why we still do a lot of information here at Open Studio. First of all, it's fun to collect information. It's a big part of becoming a better player. Like we said, it's not bad information.
Right.
It's just not the only story. In fact, it's not the most important thing. So you have to come in hungry for information, and then you have to ironically kind of like exhaust yourself on it and be like, okay, I have to let go of this information. So it's almost like this whole podcast we're doing now is going to fall on a lot of deaf ears, or maybe it'll resonate a little bit and then continue to resonate down the road.
This is going to resonate AF. Watch.
We'll see. But like the thing is you kind of do have to experience and maybe this will light some people's eyes up with like, oh, that's what I am experiencing right now, and realize like you have to work on how you play things and how you live and how honest you are and how brave you are with your art before you work on collecting another scale, collecting another voicing. You know what I mean? You have to actually experience playing music again and again and again and again.
But I think it's a very exciting thing. It's potentially it's reinvigorating to me to think about this and talk about this and exciting. I think it can be for a lot of our listeners in that, like with the meditation, once you realize that the whole point of meditation is that you're never going to be able to actually fully concentrate and meditate on something. That's a very freeing thing. Like, because
that's the point of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That forces you into the process, right?
That's right.
Into luxuriating in the process as the goal, as opposed to like getting to nirvana or getting to a totally blank mind or whatever. It like that forces you to find some other joy along the way. And I think this kind of thinking with practice, that's why this is coming out of happy practicing, like letting go of trying to information your way. We're not saying let go of the information. First of all, it's very freeing to know that the information you already have, like the most fundamental things, like what you're talking about earlier for piano technique, and Emmett and Aaron and all the great players have that, of course, at different levels. You know, just like I can dribble a basketball without, double dribbling maybe. It's a little different than Steph Curry dribbling the basketball. It's like, taking it to the artistic level. We both got the same ball or whatever. So there's this continuum that you can jump on that Ferris wheel of going around, and then maybe even realize, wait a second, I'm already on that Ferris wheel. This is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So even though you're being freed up from the information you already have, you're not going to lose that. In fact, it's going to go into your subconscious where it needs to go.
That's right.
So that you can get closer to the art. Not overnight, but it can start today in your practice. It absolutely can start today. And I was just thinking of like another way, and this should pass muster with our attorneys as well, for us to weasel out of being hypocrites on this. I had a great teacher for a short time who really was the one, Leonidas Lipovetsky.
Sounds like a serious piano teacher.
He was a fantastic. He was from Uruguay. Uruguay.
Yeah.
But
Uruguay?
Oh, you're going to go next level on me. Gotcha. You can't information your way to speaking Spanish, buddy.
You actually can't.
But he's the one who introduced me to the Phillips exercises.
Yeah.
Which, and like the idea with this though is that, and I mean, to this day, I practice them. I don't practice them every day, but I do come back to them a lot. I only use the first 2 pages of that.
I know.
I mean, I've been through a lot of it, but like 90% of the benefit I realized was there. So it's like less information, but more progress.
100%.
And it doesn't mean you couldn't go through the whole thing and do a lot of great things, but it just sort of proves the same thing like with transcribing. It's multiple choice answer. Which is the best way to become a jazz musician? Transcribing or not transcribing? C. Either.
Yeah.
Either or neither.
And by the way,
it's how you do it.
That's how you do it. You can transcribe one solo and be a great jazz musician. You can transcribe no solos and be a great jazz musician. You can transcribe 100 solos and be a great jazz musician.
You can also, I think it's important, like, to think about some of these things, like, you can also back yourself in a corner, because you can be like going through the multiple choice and like, nope, not going to do that. Nope, not going to learn the correct scale for it.
Yeah.
And you can still become a great player, but you're really backing yourself in a corner, buddy.
So how would we focus on the how, Peter? Could you think about how you would, like, my ultimate in my mind story, and this may be a myth, this may not be true. In fact, if anybody else has heard this story, let me know. Wayne Shorter, apparently, practiced in a practice room, was witnessed practicing. I don't know where Wayne Shorter would be in a practice room, but he was witnessed practicing like a half step for 6 hours or something. So I've heard 6, I've heard 12, I've heard, all day. But he practiced
10 minutes.
one half step for like 6 hours, right? And this to me is like an extreme.
John Williams practiced it for a while.
Listen, if it's post 1975, that had to have come into the picture.
Exactly.
But to me, this is an extreme example of practicing the how, not the what.
Yeah.
Right. So Wayne is taking the what out of the equation.
Yeah.
Like, speaking of like guardrails, like here's a guardrail, it's 2 notes.
It's like
what
the amoeba level, like the single cell level of interval, right? Like what's the most basic thing?
But again, back to the meditation analogy, that's what, like, when you sit and you close your eyes and you say, I'm just going to concentrate on my breath, that's what you're doing. You're taking all other stimuli out of the equation.
Yeah.
And you're saying, can I just focus on this one thing? And that's the how, not the what, right? Yeah. Because we have the what all day, every day. In fact, we have like all of the what in human history in our pocket all day, every day. And that's not helping much with the situation. But
it's not helping with my meditative practice.
Focusing on the how, meaning just like taking away all other, really putting on heavy guardrails, taking away all other options can be freeing. So I wonder, Peter, if you could think of in your practice routine, like, what are the things you do that are between the cracks, that aren't easily, data points, that are the things that are the sound, the feel, like, are you thinking about that? Or are you just living your life in this way? Because you've been doing this now for so long that is there anything that we can like take away from your practice routine from the how and not the what?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this, and I want you to answer it too.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, you're allowed to, apparently.
For example,
me, not so much.
For example, the couple weeks ago when we were talking about the scales, like the how was your. Sorry,
I practice on a silent keyboard. Actually, this is not a bad thing to do. Is practicing on a silent keyboard.
I bumped it again. The how would be like you were talking about how slow you practiced, right? Like
right.
You practice super slow.
Yeah.
I wonder if is there any more like that.
So
Peter, for instance, like when you were doing the slow scales, right?
Yes.
That's the how.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just for scales. That would be for anything. Like I'll do, I've shown this before, I think. That first Bach invention, like of all the, not that I learned that much, but I learned some different Bach and Beethoven or whatever. That's the thing I come back to, like just if I want to like center myself, that the how of like, what's the, I mean, Wayne Shorter's is so much better because he went even more basic, a half step, you know?
No,
but it's like, what is a basic, something that I'll be totally exposed, but forced in I think a happy way to be connected with the instrument, to be connected with the music, get my ears right, you know what I mean? Get my fingers like being in service to the music. Because like we always talk about being in service to music, that's true. But like true piano technique or technique of doing anything is like getting the physical things in service. It's not just a matter of like, yes, I'm in service to the music. And then you sit down at the piano and you can't do shit. You know, we gotta, you know, there is a science to it to serve the art of it, you know. So I definitely look for those just very basic things. And they're not sexy, they're boring. And they're slow. I might, if I'm going to do like a jazz thing to practice improvising, which I don't do a lot.
Yeah, but you said that.
But I'll play some. It would be something like a.
See, this is the Emmett Aaron Parks thing too. Some basic.
They stole that from me.
No, but it's a very similar thing.
And then I'll just concentrate on each line, not making the greatest solo, but on doing something like just half notes there, but also. Like, so like a triplet thing, but really make it feel right. I'm not thinking about any kind of substitutions, just one thing. And then like a lot of times I'll think of something I could play. Like right there, I was like, but I don't play that. I'm just like, in my mind, I'm boom, 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 skidly.
So what you're working on here is like your time feel, like keeping it in time, your rhythmic feel, some language things, and again, like,
but more language that I'm not actually playing. That's why I was like things that I'll think of but don't play them, because sometimes like we have to practice. Like once we get to playing, like the beautiful thing, but also potentially the curse of being able to improvise. But wanting to keep developing your skill at doing that is that once you're doing it, once you're in action, like you have to let go of all the different things of like, I'm going to put a triple. I mean, you don't have to, but it's very hard to be successful and get better as a soloist if you're not willing to just let go of that. So when you're soloing, whether you're just practicing soloing, like you're on a gig or you're actually on a gig or you've got one person listening or a million or you're doing a recording, you've got to go through that process. But when you're practicing it, you can't just do that.
Yeah.
But so because otherwise you don't let your ear, like, and it's such a cliche, but playing what you hear, we have to practice doing that.
Yeah.
And a lot of time that means not actually playing what you hear.
100%.
It's just hear it.
That's right.
But play something. Because otherwise, if I play, like I know all these things my fingers know how to do, and I'm kind of hearing them, but otherwise I'm just going to do what's comfortable or what I'm in the habit of doing or what's part of my current repertoire, you know?
And if you're at home and you're thinking like, oh, I can do this so easily. Something else to think about is, can you do this? Instead of this, can you do?
Right.
A little G flat blues. Right. Can you do a B blues? Can you do, an A blues? Can you do rhythm changes in all 12 keys and feel comfortable? Not doing like crazy McCoy Tyner solos, but like literally just like hearing anything in B flat, right, on rhythm changes, hearing anything on D on rhythm changes, right?
Yeah.
Without having to like search for things, even slower than that,
Absolutely.
Just the most basic versions.
Go slower than people are always like, how slow should I practice? How fast should I practice? Slower, anywhere slower than you can actually fully execute something.
Yeah.
Go slower.
Yeah.
Never be at, like, if you're messing anything up, and by messing up, I mean the time, the changes, even if you feel like you're not controlling the sound enough, slow it down even more. It's going to get harder at first, but you'll find that place, and like what you'll gain from that in terms of like technique, but also like ear stuff that you slow down enough to start to have to hear it in advance, all these little things, like that's kind of where it's at. And that takes time, because it's like, it's really more of a philosophy or a concept than in a specific like information about how to practice, where I know I'm showing it on one thing and then you're showing it on different keys and stuff, but like it starts to manifest itself as a philosophy of how you're going to approach practicing. And that's the important information.
That's right. It's first of all, just getting to the instrument consistently, working on something.
Yeah.
Got to do something.
Yeah.
Peter Martin, 2024. But also just taking what you have, basic things of what you have, and exhausting them through some like essential foundational principles. You mentioned too, when you were just walking that G blues, about like, about practicing hearing things. One of my favorite exercises to do in Open Studio Pro is actually our ritualistic warm-up.
Yeah.
That sounded kind of dark, but
it's like a call to practice.
It is the call to practice,
prayer.
the chromatic scale. And we'll do it. We've been doing it very slowly.
It is creepy though when you take that teacup and go ding at the end of it and then get everyone to wire or Venmo you $1. That's weird.
Yeah, don't spill that tea. No, we work on the chromatic scale sometimes. We work on other scales, but the chromatic scale is great because as soon as you kind of like have a basic version of the chromatic scale, you don't need to think about anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's just all the notes, especially when you're going this slowly, And what we like to do is I'll have everybody play it once 4 octaves, right? So I'll do that now. I would even go slower than this, but I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. Actually, let's do 2 octaves here. Just do these 2 octaves. And the first time we're just playing it, not thinking about anything. But now that we've heard it, what I often ask the students to do, I'll invite them to now play it again. And as you're playing it, see if you can hear it in your mind's ear, right? We have your mind's eye, where I can say, think of a pink elephant, and you can vision a pink elephant. And by the way, scientifically, you know that there's degrees to which people can see the visions. Like some people can see very realistic things. Some people, it's more like a shadowy version.
I'm seeing a cartoony pink elephant.
Most people do. It's a pink elephant. It doesn't really exist. But you can have the same effect with your mind's ear.
Yeah.
So you can hear things. And I'll often invite people to, let's play this chromatic scale again.
Mind's ear?
Mind's ear, your mind's ear. Let's play it again. And in your mind's ear, I want you to try to hear, the first version I do is I want you to try to hear what it would sound like if it were played by your favorite piano player. This is often kind of the easiest step in. Like, so the pianist that you love their sound the most. So for me, I might think someone like Hank
Jerry Lou
Jones.
Lewis. Oh, sorry. I thought we were saying at the same time. Jerry Lou Lewis.
Jerry Lou Lewis?
Jerry Lee Lewis?
Can we back that up? Jerry Lou Lewis.
No, don't back anything
Peter
up.
Martin, 2024. No, so I'll invite you to think about what would it sound like if on this instrument, Keith Jarrett played this scale, right? Which you're like, why would Keith Jarrett ever
It would
play?
sound like this. It would be all triads,
It
right?
would be all triads. Good news.
Oh, sorry. That's wrong.
That's not right. Sorry, Keith. Love you, Keith.
Yeah, I love you, Keith.
No, but the idea is...
It would sound amazing. That's
it would sound
like.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
But what would the character... First of all, he would never play a Rhodes. What would the
He did
characteristics
with Miles.
sound like? What would it feel like if Keith were to play this chromatic scale? And the idea is, can you hear that as you're doing it? As you're about to hit the next
Yeah.
note, can you hear the sound?
Ooh.
Then the most important part about this is, can you completely let go of anything that actually happens? So whether you nail it or you fail it,
Right.
can you not care
Oh, I love this.
about the results at all? Just focus your mind on the sound in your mind's ear of what would it sound like if Keith Jarrett played this scale? And can you just hear it? That's practicing hearing it. And like oftentimes
You'll
people
hear
will
it.
say like, well, if I don't care about the results, I'm not going to sound good. I'm like, give it a shot. See if you can not care about the results.
Right.
Like just try not caring about the
Right.
results, because I guarantee you're not going to last 10 seconds. It's like the first time someone tries to meditate. Like, yeah, I can pay attention to my breath. Yeah. See how long you can last.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. it's almost impossible for human beings not to care about our results.
Right.
But it's a noble exercise. And what it does, when you do this, if you try this with me now, you're at home and you're near your keyboard. If we do this scale 2 octaves, and I try to think about, for me, it's Keith Jarrett. It could be Herbie Hancock, could be Bill Evans, could be Peter Martin. But I'm thinking about how this would sound in my mind's ear. And then the important part, again, letting go of the results. I don't care if I do it or I don't. I'm just focusing on the sound. What happens, I'm smiling right now because it always sounds better to me. Like, it always sounds good. I'm always delighted by how good it sounds. But more than that, it has become effortless. It's like this effortless, beautiful sound that usually happens. I can't quite get this on every solo I do, every gig I do. But this is a practice of mine that has been really fruitful over the last couple of years, because when I'm nailing it, when I'm actually not caring about if I nail or fail, but I'm just focusing on hearing the music that I want to hear, it is easier and it always sounds better. And then even if it doesn't sound good, if I'm doing it right, I don't care.
It feels good.
It feels great. Yeah, I don't care. And then you could take this too, once you kind of get used to like trying to hear I often say your favorite piano player, because oftentimes we have an idea of what their sound is more than our own sound. But ideally, you want to be like, what would this sound like if I played this ideally for me today on this instrument?
Right.
If we can get there, that's kind of the promised land. For a lot of people, it takes a little bit of work to get to that place.
So is by saying, what would this sound like if Keith Jarrett was playing this chromatic scale, is that more of like, almost like triggering a growth mindset for you, like as opposed to being like a fixed mindset would be more like, well, I don't know, because I've never heard Keith Jarrett just play a chromatic scale.
Yeah.
But it's like to be not just aspirational as far as like, well, I'm going to judge how much I failed and then I'll practice more and one day I'll be able to play the scale again.
No, yeah.
But maybe there's a little bit of like connecting yourself with the music, connecting yourself with the greats, but also just it's almost immaterial. Yeah, Keith Jarrett comes to mind because he's such an incredible player. And so it's kind of like easy to be like, wow. It would almost be a cliche. Can you play a chromatic scale like Keith Jarrett? That means like, can you shoot a 3-pointer like Steph Curry? Like, even if you don't know basketball, you're like, well, that's going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And you might think, no, I could never do that. But like, who hasn't sat in the gym, if you have any connection with basketball, especially when you're a kid, and we talk about being an infant again as we get older, and like taking a basketball and you're like, man, I don't know, it's so far, I don't know. But then you're thinking about, because why? You've seen Steph Curry on TV do it, and you're like, you take on some of the affectations, you connect yourself or try somehow you're like, woo. Well, and if it goes in, oh man, for that moment, you are Steph Curry, right?
But what you're actually doing is you are developing your taste as you do this. This is actually the goal. I think we talked about this with Fred Hirsch once on a mentor session, because he was kind of echoing a similar thing. And I think me and him had a bit of a back and forth about this, because I was so honored that he kind of thinks along the same lines. If you don't have a sound in your head, how can you have it on the keyboard, right? If you don't have a vision or a feeling of what shooting a jump shot looks like, how can you possibly do it?
Right. Well, even the pros, when they come up to the free throw line, what do they do before? They bounce and then they
practice the motion.
Yeah.
And this is a similar thing. If you can't have a sound in your head of what you want to sound like, how are you expecting? Then you're just running your fingers over your keyboard. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You're going to have a terrible sound. You don't have any point of view on anything. So this is practice.
And why not aim high?
Aim high. But then also, when you kind of can switch it and turn it around on yourself and say, well, what would this sound like if I were to play this ideally for me? If I had my ideal sound on this instrument today, what would that sound like? It also forces you into your own discernment of like choosing your own taste as opposed to letting your taste choose you.
Yes.
Right? Of like really trying to whittle down, what do I want to hear?
And this is a great way to like, we're going to refute in advance. I know some people are going to be like, wait, hold on. We're supposed to be doing things to develop our personality and our sound. We're going to spend all this time trying to sound like Keith Jarrett, and then you're going to get on the gig, and at best...
give it a shot. Go.
No, but this is the thing. This is what I was saying earlier. Like, once you get on the gig, if you do this stuff right, and by do this stuff right, I don't mean play the chord. I mean, I'm saying like accept that this philosophy, not these specific, like some of this stuff you can sub out, you can do a whole tone, I mean, you can do whatever you want. So we're not saying this specific information, but this approach, this concept, this philosophy, this kind of, way of going about that, practicing and developing, like we're talking about. Once you get on the gig or practice performing or just play, you're not going to be able to escape sounding like yourself.
That's true.
And wherever you are, which is what the goal is.
That's the goal.
You know what I mean? And if that ends up being exactly like Keith Jarrett, well, God bless you. You know, that's not a bad place to show up. But I mean, the whole thing is like, this will reveal, that's going to set the bar. And it's not even like, oh, he can play a chromatic scale better than Herbie. No, it's like, these are just different. This is Mount Rushmore. You take your pick.
No, you like Robert Glasper? Well, then you like, Robert's taste in Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and McCoy Tyner.
Yeah.
You like Brad Mehldau? Well, then you like Brad Mehldau's taste in McCoy Tyner and all the people that came before him.
And I mean, and it's like, you're not like, because I think what we're describing is coming really with a pure heart musically and like really trying to get the mind's ear happening as we practice. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, then am I going to be judging myself when I'm playing that I don't sound like that, or that I do sound like that, or I'm like that. Well, this is gonna what's gonna get you, and it's not gonna be perfect or overnight, but this will get you to the point where when you're performing, you're not gonna be able to escape being yourself.
But that's where the second half of this comes in very handy.
Wait, we're only halfway done?
No, the second half of that exercise. It's not just trying to hear what Keith Jarrett would play. It's letting go of results, even if you do it.
Right.
Of not patting yourself on the back for nailing it.
And that's what's going to lead you when you're playing to that same kind of great...
non-judgmental, hearing the music that's inside of you.
Loop instead of a negative one.
And all you're doing is practicing getting the music that is in you're practicing developing your own taste and getting the music that's in your head to the keyboard. And then you're letting go of anything that actually happens in reality. And that is the promised land for me of like, being free and open and just trying to hear what the spirit of the moment is telling me to play, right? Is like to really connect with my fellow players, with the people in the audience, with the birds chirping outside the window, everything here, and like make it a part of the music without judgment, without putting my ego forward, with just being in music. And it's a high goal and it's probably unattainable.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes it fun.
It is really fun. I mean, this is Wayne practicing a half step for 8 hours, or we'll say 18 hours. But that idea of if you can really work on that consistently, of trying to hear a sound and then letting go of the results of what you're doing, just let yourself have that. Again, a lot of people when I bring this up are like, well, not just what if I sound like Keith Jarrett? But they do say stuff like, well, how can I let go of results? Like I'll just sound bad. It's like, give it a shot for 15 minutes.
Right.
Like just give yourself a little space for a minute to just give it a shot. Full circle. That's a callback. That's a pro move.
Cool,
give it a shot. See how long you can last without judging yourself and what you play. Because it's more difficult than you think, even with hours and hours and hours of practice.
And it's such a great, like, when you get into the zone, and if you can get there 70, 80% of your practice time, that's great. Even if you get there 50% of this, it's going to be really interesting, because this is the type of practice that is super beneficial, and it's super fun, and it's the kind of thing that you do that like the time just stops.
Yeah.
And then you look up and it's like 2 hours have gone by and you're like, wow.
Another question.
And it is, but I also would say this is definitely practicing smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Because it's like anything, once it gets to be fun, like that, it doesn't feel like practice and work. It's just like, it's invigorating. You're going to get energy from this.
Another thing this practice can do, I think, or just the idea of listening to your mind's ear in general, working on the music that's inside of you, trying to hear the music that wants to come out, is a lot of people will say, well, what if I'm not hearing a lot of music? Well, you need to load your hard drive with some music so that you can play the music that wants to come out. So you need to listen.
Yeah.
And you start to realize, we talk about transcription, it's about learning solos, about learning music that masters we play. So that's another exercise in discernment, in developing your taste.
Yeah.
And then in spending time with what you want to be doing and letting that sort of flow through you.
Yeah.
And so you can't hear something that you've never, you can't hear music that you have no reference for at all.
Right. And people shouldn't get confused with this, but they're like, hold on a second. I know somebody like that's got great ears. They can hear something one time and then just like play it right back and stuff.
It's not quite the same.
It's not the same. Exactly. And I think it's there because there's that marination process. It's like you can make the portobello mushroom and put it on the grill. And if you put the sauce on right before, it's going to work. But if you let it marinate in there first, it's going to be a different flavor. It's going to seep in deeply. And I think that's what you're referring to is like that marination period.
And not everything you listen to is going to resonate with you.
Right.
So there's some
and that's okay.
That's great. That's good, actually.
Is there not a world of music out here?
There's a world of music, but you can't, again, you can't get there unless you actually spend a lot of time listening to music.
Yeah.
And I was about to say music you love, but it really doesn't matter. You'll find music you love.
Well, and this is the other fun
keep
part.
Listening.
Yeah, keep listening. This is the fun part of it. And this is where the information can get in the way sometimes, because it's like, oh, well, the information, doing these scales, doing the voicings, using this drop 2 system or whatever. These are all things that work, and there's great examples of them. But if you get caught up in that just as like a system, as an input to get a certain output, you're missing the point. Yes, you get that, but then experience that listening to Barry Harris.
Yeah.
If you're interested in the drop 2, like listen to the master doing it and absorb that, and then don't like feel guilty, like, oh, I should be at the piano. Like an hour of listening to the same track over and over again.
It's good work.
It's good work, and it's good fun. You know, it's like,
Totally.
you know, if I told you could go to a brewery and just drink beers, and the more that you drank, the better you'd feel, and the healthier you would get. It's not the case though, but this is like, where do we find things that like the more you do of something up to a point, then of course you got to take it to the instrument, but you get that balance right. The listening part can be so important, so fun, and such a like direct connection, the same way when we aspire to play a scale like Keith Jarrett or whatever, when we listen to something, we watch Steph Curry. Of course, like you're not going to be able to just sit there and watch the NBA all day and then just go play in a pickup game. You got to also practice, you got to work out and stuff, but you get that balance right, it's fun.
In the spirit of balance,
yes,
I will bring up a quote from Miles Davis, who said, cats today are listening to too many records to be themselves.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah,
whereas like musicians today, young musicians today.
He also said Stevie Wonder's a sad MF.
That was a hilarious post. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Nicholas Payton reposted? We got to talk about that.
We're going to talk about
We need to actually talk about jazz beefs. I don't know if you've been following the Kendrick Lamar Drake.
Of course. Oh my God. I'm all over that. Man.
It's incredible.
I mean, I'm no Drake fan, but I'm also like, I don't like disparaging. I love Canada.
It's so funny that Nicholas Payton posted that. So he's referencing this article where Miles Davis and
it's from
Stevie
1974 Downbeat, which is crazy, you know.
Miles Davis and Stevie Wonder have a beef.
Right.
It's really one-sided.
It's a
because Stevie
one-sided
seemed
beef.
to be like, man, that's crazy.
Stevie just elevated like above the whole thing so well.
Yeah,
you know?
talk about letting go of the results.
Yeah.
But I was thinking we could do a jazz beefs thing. I mean, they'll mostly be Miles with other musicians.
Miles with Wynton. I remember that when Musician Magazine, like 1984.
Yeah.
That one was good.
Miles had a beef with Wynton?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, man. Huge one. And they had an article where they were like debating stuff, you know. And
Charles Mingus shot his piano player.
well,
That's a
that
good one.
goes beyond beef.
Yeah.
Lee Morgan's wife shot him. I don't think is that a jazz beef or just a jazz
that counts.
husband-wife
that
beef?
Just a sad domestic dispute.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, this is great, man. I want to say, since we're talking about community and commune and how am I going to connect this commenting? Yes, I want to comment on an important thing today. Today is producer Caleb's birthday. So we want you guys to send some virtual love. You're going to be a couple weeks late.
By the way, Caleb, more than one request for a Caleb mic.
Exactly. I
We
have
had
that on
one for a while.
Yeah, we had it in the comments.
If you
Why
could
are
post
you
something permanently over there, we would use it.
Yeah. Now we have to tell everybody.
He just gave us the look of like, great, more work for me. Thanks.
He's like, I got to mix 3 mics now. Anyway, we want to send out a big shout out to producer Caleb and send him a lot of love on his birthday today.
Yeah, for real.
Who holds this whole thing together.
That's right.
Yeah. What else we got?
That's it, man.
Did we hit an hour?
Oh, yeah, we certainly did. Yeah.
Caleb's like, give me a mic now. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for listening today. Thanks for the great comments. You can't information your way to being a better player.
But you can go to openstudiojazz.com/pro and become a better player.
Slick.
Till next time.
You'll hear it.